You know, as ex-Christians, we can sometimes be negative Nancy's about the Bible. We get really upset about the disgusting things it says. We mock it because there's people that literally believe it when it's just obviously fairy tales and myths. But there's actually quite a bit to appreciate in the book. Sometimes it's funny, and what it's trying to do might even be successful, and that's actually really, really smart. Is it divinely inspired? Well, you'll have to watch the video to find out. It's not. Hi folks, welcome to Joel Reads Bible. I'm Joel and I read Bibles so that you don't have to. And this is one of our super special sexy episodes that we do every 10 chapters or so. And in celebration of finishing the whole entire Torah, we're going to be looking back, doing a retrospective of the book, and I'm going to be sharing what I loved about the Torah. One thing that I observed about the Torah that it seemed to be doing throughout is telling stories as object lessons for laws that would be given later, or sometimes, like in the case of Nadab and Abihu, which I know I mispronounce every time, but they gave the object lesson after we had like the 10 chapters of this is how you do this and that and the other thing, and then they do it wrong and then they get killed. So we get the object lesson after the fact. Sometimes it's even in the same chapter, but a lot of time we get hints of things in Genesis which later on is going to come out as, hey, this is a law that we don't do. And you can kind of go like, do you remember that old story? And I'll highlight a few of those as we go through some of my favorite stories in the Torah. One of them that I'll bring up now, which I don't know for sure if this was purposeful, but it's when Moses kills the guy and then he runs away to the other town. And what we get many times, I think in Leviticus and for sure in Deuteronomy, is these like places that the guy that accidentally kills another guy can run to and live for a while before he comes back. Now, I'm pretty sure Moses purposely killed the guy, or he killed him out of anger to protect his Hebrew brethren or what have you. There still seems to be a little bit of a connection there. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Now, if you think that that's a thin connection, then you've never heard of typology, because talk about thin connections. Anyway, the first story that I loved in the Torah, you're going to be surprised by it. It is the story of Noah's Ark. Just think for a moment how absolutely massive this set piece is, right? If you're writing a fictional story, this is like over the top, epic, superhero level storytelling. He builds a giant boat. He gets two of every single animal, and there's a storm. Rain so severe, rain coming up from the ground, coming down from the sky, which covers the whole entire earth 20 meters above the highest mountain. Like, that is absolutely wild. What a cool sort of idea. And we get a reference to the Nephilim, which is also absolutely insane. I don't know if it's a later fleshing out of what the Nephilim were in other chapters of the book or in the book of Enoch, but these are like giant, violent, giant, hybrid, half angel, half humanoid things, right? Like, that's crazy. Like, it really is such a big, epic, wild scene that you kind of have to appreciate it, because these are people that I'm sure live pretty common lives. They're in a desert digging wells, they have some livestock, they're trying to make families, they're nomadic, they're subjugating women, and yet they have this fantastic imagination about a global flood. Well, they don't know it's a globe. So a flood on the whole entire flat earth, and it's just this epic disaster movie type of story, which you gotta appreciate it. You gotta appreciate the imagination of these shepherds, essentially. Then they have the story of Noah and Ham. It's the origin story of the ongoing feud that's going to happen. That's clever. That early? Now, of course, what order these things were written in, I feel like the Torah was basically compiled at the same time, and everything was like contrived to serve a purpose, which again is clever. You got to hand it to them. It is clever. You're creating your enemy narrative and you're starting it nice and early, and that's going to come back later. That's just good storytelling. That's just good myth making. And seeing Noah's nakedness seems to be a reference, or could be, and some people consider it a reference. I don't think it really works, but with Leviticus 18, where we get the reference to like, don't look upon your mother's nakedness or your mom because she is your father's nakedness. However it words it, it kind of seems like that might have been what was going on in the Noah story. Although it's just kind of weird because it's like, who did they put the blanket on? And Noah got really drunk and he was the one that seemed naked. So it's I don't know, it's just not clear enough, I would say, to commit to that reading of it. But if it is, that's what's going on there. It's another really clever sort of like, hey, this is the kind of crazy stuff that happens if you don't follow these laws in Leviticus. You know, you might become Canaan, which is the next enemy of all the people, right? So that's kind of a neat move that they do there. As soon as an ex-Christian, you don't go like, this is true and we have to find the good, godly, divine thing that's going on with this. It's actually kind of neat what they're doing, and it's certainly entertaining. Speaking of entertaining, we then get the story of Judah and Tamar. And it's a really frustrating and upsetting story, again, if you take it seriously. But if you see it as a complete and utter fiction, it's actually a really good fiction. I love when irony is used. And this story has some great irony. But what I found throughout the Torah is kind of this irreverence. You know, like the Hebrews are not really delicate with their narratives. They don't paint everyone in a beautiful light because conflict's really important. And when you're doing something or writing a story and the characters do things that the culture would be like, oh, that makes for a compelling story, right? And this is how people still write stories. They still do narratives that are conflicting and upsetting. And so I think that that's really what's going on. And when you read it as a Christian, you're like, well, what am I to understand here? This is the patriarch. This is the faithful one. This is the one that's following all the rules and the laws and decrees. This is a great man that I'm supposed to look up to. But I don't know that the Hebrews of the time were that delicate with it. They're like, oh yeah, we've got Judah banging a prostitute. You know, that's wild. That's crazy. I don't know that it was really wrong or edgy for a man to sleep with a prostitute. I feel like that men could do whatever they wanted. But it is still like they're doing things in the story which I'm sure are taboo. In the story, which of course is written in the rule of 3, we have Tamar marrying Ur. Ur does something wrong. It doesn't matter. We don't care. It's not important to the story. Get rid of him. He dies. God kills him. Then Onan comes along, and Onan, he goes ahead and sleeps with Tamar, but he doesn't want to impregnate her because he doesn't want to give his dead brother a son for whatever reason. I guess he just wants to retain all of his sperm for his own women and his own sons. Like, I don't know why he would care about that. And so what he does is he pulls out. And this, of course, is a reference to levirate marriage that we'll find in Deuteronomy chapter 25. Again, an object lesson to kind of say, like, this is what we should be doing. This is what your duty is. So do that. But if you don't, a woman will just spit in your face and slap you with your sandal. In this case, of course, much harsher. God is really upset that he doesn't want to impregnate her, so he kills him, which, again, if we're looking at like objective morality or God being immutable and some sort of consistency, that doesn't work anymore. But if we ignore that and put it to one side, obviously we're getting a hint for the levirate marriage. Cool move, Great job. Neat little object lesson. And that gives us an excuse to get rid of Onan. So we get our object lesson and our story, and we can go on with our narrative, which now the third piece, we're going to turn it on its head. Judah says, no thanks, I don't want to give you my third son because everybody that sleeps with Tamar dies. So we don't want to do that anymore. So what we're going to do is just have her mourn. Go mourn, right? And now Tamar is like, but I need a baby. The whole thing with women is just to make babies. And we see this again throughout the Torah. And I'm sure that's just solidifying this idea that like, have baby. You gotta have babies. Women's whole thing is to have babies, make lots of babies, right? So she's like, I gotta get a baby. I'm desperate to make a child. Stat. She does this clever plan. She goes down to the gate of the city and dresses like a prostitute, I'm sure with a veil, so you can't see her face. And she waits around until Judah comes down and goes, I like the look of that. And they sleep together. And he goes, here's, I don't have anything to pay you. Here's my staff and my seal. I'll send a goat, and then you can give that back to my guy. So she's like, great, cool. I guess she kept the veil on. Like, I guess there was not... They do very anonymous sex in those days, I suppose. So nice. Sounds really enjoyable. But I think, again, this is kind of like this edgy sort of taboo. What? This is a compelling story. So Judah sends the servant back down to town to find the prostitute and give her the goat. She's nowhere to be found. Tamar is obviously back in her mourning state and just like minding her own business. And then later on, she finally starts showing, I'm sure, and everybody realizes, uh-oh, she's pregnant. So they go to Judah and they go, your daughter-in-law, she's pregnant. She's been playing the prostitute. She must have slept with someone who's not her husband, who's dead, or her husband's brother, or her husband's other brother, right? She's essentially your property, I would assume. I guess that's what it seems like. And she's done something wrong. So Judah's like, well, we're going to have to burn her alive. They go to her house. They're like, we're going to burn you and your baby alive, which is like, everyone's like totally cool with that. This is the culture. Again, like horrific if it were a true story. Horrific that would probably be something that's like reasonable to the person reading this story. Horrific if you're a Christian going like, well, the reason why was, whatever. You got to just go like, oh yeah, that's awful. But I'm sorry. Unfortunately, this is probably an object lesson or at least a foreshadowing to Leviticus 21:9 that says to burn women alive if they sleep around. If you're a priest, not everyone, but if you're a priest, so this isn't, far off from what the laws that were given from God were, which is, again, horrific if true, horrific if you're defending it, okay? But Judah goes, burn her alive, and Tamar goes, you can burn me alive, but just know that this staff and this seal belong to the father of my unborn child. And Judah gets them and goes, you got me. Oh, Tamar, you got me. The irony. I love irony. It's fantastic. You're judging me for being a prostitute. You're the one that slept with that prostitute. And then she's celebrated. They're like, that was smart. That was smart. You needed a kid. You wanted a kid. You should be making babies, totally what we want. And you tricked me. You got some of my semen. Smart. Well done, Tamar. I love that. I love using the rule of three, using irony to tell a compelling story. It's a good ironic tale. And again, this type of story shows up even today. There's that classic story where a man goes to see a prostitute, and when he gets there, it's his wife being the prostitute, and they're both looking at each other going like, who can get mad at who right now? Because we both are doing the same thing, right? It's just great irony. And this is like pretty early. This is written probably around 500 BCE or something like that. I like it. There's a lot of really funny moments in the Torah. One of them, of course, is the comedy. I'm sure it's supposed to be a comedy. It has to be a comedy of Jacob deceiving Isaac. It's impossible that it's not. There are just too many really funny moments where Jacob goes in to deceive Isaac, and it's just so obvious that Isaac knows what's going on. I don't think anyone could read this and be like, he got him. He really, really got him. And if you read it, it's just so silly. I bet you could like hear a laugh track to it. I'll read it to you. It goes, "So he went in to his father and said, 'My father.' And he said, 'Here I am. Who are you?' And he said," Jacob said, "'Here I am. Who are you, my son?'" Like, wouldn't you know once you hear the voice? This is where it's like not great writing, but it seems like it's like we really want to quickly get to the point of this scene, you know? So it's like, "Here I am. Who are you, my son?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Now sit up and eat of my game, so that you may bless me." But Isaac said to his son, "How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son?" So he's on to him. He answered, "Because the Lord your God granted me success." Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come near, that I may feel you, my son, to know whether you are really my son Esau or not." So he isn't trusting it. Of course not. He got back too soon. And by the way, probably there's going to be a rule of 3 here again. So Jacob went up to his father Isaac, who felt him and said, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau." What are we doing this detective work for, Mr. Magoo? Like, what's happening here? Why are we like, you don't sound like Esau, but you feel like him, which is goat hair. Esau's hair feels like goat hair, which you would just see, like, probably if it was a play, you know, goat skin, and Isaac is touching it, and he'll say, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like his brother's Esau's hands, so he blessed him. He said, "Are you really my son Esau?" So now he's like, "Really?" Third one. This is how you can tell it's fiction, because they put it conveniently in 3s. He answered, "I am." Then he said, "Bring it to me that I may eat of my son's game and bless you." So he brought it to him, and he ate, and he brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come near and kiss me, my son." So he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his garments and blessed him and said, "Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of the field that the Lord has blessed." Of course, we get the smell. He smells like Esau for some reason, which is also funny. I'm sure there would be a laugh to that too. But this, I think, is meant to be comedic. Seems obvious that it's a little bit too silly. Maybe for children, it's just something that like you wouldn't take seriously as an adult. And I don't believe that the people who are writing this are like compelling. This is probably true, you know, unless it's just something that it's light entertainment. You know, it's not something that's like meant to be a very good work of fiction. You know what I'm saying? It's just like a play that everyone just, again, would laugh because it's a little bit over the top. Speaking of comedy, the story of Jacob and Rachel and Leah is hilarious. Now, it seems that the object lesson here is the rule, I think it's also Leviticus 18, that says don't marry sisters. Like, do not, if you marry a sister, don't marry her other sister. That's just bad news. And that's what happens accidentally. You know, Jacob gets deceived by Laban, but boy, is it ever comical. Now, of course, if it's true, and if this is the culture and God's cool with it, horrible, absolutely horrific. And to not have empathy for Leah is really cruel. But if we look at it as a fictional story, And these two women get married to Jacob, and they both want to make babies for him. And there's this competition because a woman's worth is only in her making children. It's just this really funny episode where Rachel and Leah are getting their two slaves, essentially, to sleep with Jacob. Again, they're slaves. I'm sure they're not consenting. It's horrific. It's awful. We shouldn't be celebrating this. But what a comical story for the people at the time, I'm sure, where they're trading mandrakes, which I think were aphrodisiacs at the time, or something that made you feel good, or I don't really know what they were. They were trading these things, and like, if I give you those, can I sleep with my husband? Okay, fine, And they were just like trying so hard to make as many boy babies for Jacob as they possibly could. And it's funny. It's like a farce. It just like escalates and escalates. It's really great. And this is how we get the tribes of Israel, which is also kind of funny that they're like, okay, how are we going to get 12 kids? We have to get 12 kids. And they do it in a like kind of fun way. A fun way in the sense that they're like playing off of, I'm sure, tropes of the time where it's just like, well, women will constantly just be trying to make babies with their husband to please him, And so they're just like, you sleep with him. Can I sleep? I want to sleep with him now, And it's really funny. You should go watch that episode because it was I think it's really fun. The next fantastic comedic scene, which I absolutely loved. And you find a number of these in the Torah. The problem is they're so hidden amongst all the boring stuff, like all the dry stuff, and then the laws. And then you have to like fight with the idea that this is true, like, you know what I mean? And then the morality of God, which is just like, well, it's not questionable. It's absolutely horrific. You know what I mean? But this scene of the burning bush and Moses having the conversation with God is some of the best comedy you're going to get, probably from the era of like 500 BC. I don't know that much about ancient texts, but this one is particularly funny. So God says to Moses, all right, I'm God. I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. You're God. I'm the main guy. I'm really great. And you should love me. You're going to go and get my people out of Egypt. Do you like? That sounds fun, right? You're going to be the prophet, the savior of these people. And Christians are going to think you're a typology for Jesus. He never says that. Nobody ever says that. That's just something that they come up with way later and just like, talk about thin connections. But Moses pushes back, and that's the funny part, because he's like, do I have to? And he goes, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God's like, I will be with you. He's not even answering the question, as I pointed out when I read it originally. But it really gets funny in chapter 4, because Moses goes, I don't talk good. He's like, and it's funny how it's written here. It goes, pardon your servant, Lord, but I've never been eloquent, which he wouldn't say that eloquently. He would just be like, me no talk good, though. Me no talk good. He goes, I'm slow of speech and tongue, And the Lord goes, who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, and I will help you speak and teach you what to say. And he goes, pardon me, but like, can you just send someone else? Please? I don't want to do it. God gets mad. Like, this is funny. Can you just send someone else? God gets so mad, and he's like, fine, we'll just get Aaron, we'll get your brother, we'll get him, I know he can speak well. By the way, he's already on his way. He already had him coming on the way. Like this, and that shows that God, suddenly we have a moment where God's omniscient. He keeps forgetting things in Genesis, but suddenly he's omniscient. So he just like completely folds. But I just love the idea that Moses is just like, I don't really want to do it. They're probably not even going to believe what I say. And he gets them to do a bunch of like really creepy miracles. Like it's just funny. It's funny dialogue. It's funny that Moses is whining, and it's funny that God is just like, oh, fine. He goes through the motions, even though he's omniscient. And he's like, I know that you're not going to want to do this. You're going to complain about this, but I'm going to still argue it until finally I give in and get your brother involved. It's like so silly. It really is. It's funny when you look at it that way, but I think it's funny even for the people that didn't think God was omniscient at this time. And they're just like doing this funny back and forth where Moses is like, I don't even really want to do it. And I don't even know why they do that, because Moses ends up doing most of the talking. Like Aaron does. I think it's just to like introduce Aaron. It's just like we need to get the Levitical priesthood in there. So let's get Aaron involved. Let's get this other character here. I think that's literally what the point of this part of the story is. It's to foreshadow the cool tricks that he's going to do. So they foreshadow that, even though I don't think he ever does the leprosy hand thing that's described in this section. And then just to get Aaron in the story, really funny and an enjoyable scene and a cool move. Now, I loved Exodus 32. I love that story because it fails on so many levels. It starts with, Moses going away for a bit to do whatever he needs to do up on the mountain, get laws or what have you. The people are like, where's Moses? Oh no, he's not here. I guess we should make a new god in the shape of a calf out of, whatever, jewelry. We'll worship it as if it's the God that brought us out of Egypt, which is insane, right? Like that's not reasonable for a narrative. So there must be another reason, and I discussed that in the recap of Exodus 31 to 40. And then God, who is omniscient and knows all things from the beginning of time, like infinite years ago, he knew that this was going to happen, but he still gets so angry that his anger burns, and he tells Moses to leave him alone. Leave me alone so my anger can burn. So silly, so human. Oh, I'm just an angry God. Really moody, a big storm in my brain. And then Moses has to appeal to his ego and be like, if you kill all of us, because he's like, I'm going to kill all of you. He goes, if you kill all of us, God, you're going to look dumb in front of everyone else. God's like, I don't want to look dumb. So he doesn't do it. God, who's omniscient, who is the creator of all the people, doesn't want to look dumb in front of some of the people. And that's why he changes his mind, which in Numbers, we're going to see that he doesn't change his mind. In other places, he's immutable. Everyone says he's immutable. He's not. He changes his mind. There's just so many points of failure. And then he still has like 3,000 of them killed by their best friends, their best Levitical friends, which of course is a literary device to make the Levites cool. We finally solidify them as the best, right? They're the ones that are going to step up and actually do the hard thing of killing their best friends and neighbors and brothers so that God's happy, so that his anger is satiated. It's such a ridiculous chapter that I loved it. It's not one of the ones that's like, oh, this is a great story. It's more of just like a ridiculous story full of theological pitfalls for Christianity, probably not in the same way for Judaism or anything like that. But certainly for Christianity, if you want to take any of this stuff seriously, it's a huge failure. So I thought that was really fun and entertaining. There's an interesting thing in Exodus when they're describing what the priests will wear when we get the Levitical priest outfits and all the rest of it, and how the tabernacle is going to work, and the Holy of Holies section, the different sections of the tabernacle. We're going to have a priest who has a rope tied around his waist. When he goes into the Holy of Holies, the rope is on the outside, like and it doesn't really tell us what that's for. But it does kind of like hint at the purity of the priest in some way. When I read it, I was just like, oh, that's that rope that they use. If the priest isn't pure enough, if he's not holy enough, then God will strike him dead, and they can just drag out his body. That's not anywhere in the book, which was surprising to me because it was something that I was taught when I grew up in the church. I was taught as if this is a factual story. And I brought it up when I was having a conversation with another Christian, and they kind of were like, they didn't react to it as if like this is something we all know as something that's in the Bible, because it's not in there. Not everybody was taught that. It might be in some other Jewish texts, of course, that are trying to understand what's happening in the Torah, which is also strange that like there is a group of people like years later who are just like trying to uncover what it was that was being said in the Torah, even though if it had been written or created or intrinsically part of Hebrew culture from the time of Moses, and they had continued to tell these stories and sing these songs and have kind of these laws written somewhere or spoken to their children as the Torah says they should do, then by the time the stuff is written down in 500 BCE, you'd think that this would just be stuff everybody knows. And from that point on, again, would just be stuff that everybody knows. Rather than the book sort of shows up around 500 BCE, we don't really know if anybody was burning women alive or how all these laws were followed or not followed. Like, was somebody killed for picking up sticks, or is that just like a fictional story that's in this fictional book of myths that are there to help develop a nation? So it's really interesting that like somewhere down the line, someone else is going, what did that mean? Instead of being like, oh yeah, that's how that was all the time. We know this because we have records of it, or, you know, there's just people with that knowledge base. There are some cultures that have been around for a really long time, like the Chinese, which have records of their lives with a language that is still alive, where they can actually read the old stuff and understand it and see what was going on at what time. This is like a dead language. Everyone's just like trying to figure out what it means. How did the Hebrews lose touch so much with this stuff? I'm going on a bit of a rant here, but one thing that maybe this isn't really what I loved about the Torah, but it's something that I noticed, which is that Christians will make stuff up based on the Torah and then pass it off as true. And there's a lot of different tales and stories which certain sects and denominations of the cult will grab onto and become popular for a time, and it becomes part of the zeitgeist. And sometimes it's more widespread through all the different denominations. Sometimes it's a little bit more specific. This is how the cult is made. And it should just show you how loosely it's based on this book, and how they just get stuff from anywhere to kind of add to the storyline or add compelling details, you know. But just imagine if this were true, that a priest of God would have a rope tied around their waist so that if they were impure, God would strike them dead. Imagine that like still happened like with Catholic priests. How many dead Catholic priests would we have? And wouldn't there be so many more followers because it would be true, right? You'd be like, yeah, no, it's true. A Catholic priest dropped dead, probably because of the diddling, you know what I mean? That would be fantastic. I'd be a Christian because I would believe it, and then I'd also be like, that's great. God is against pedophilia. So we don't get an indicator of that in the Bible, unfortunately, but But it would be nice if he would kill pedophiles who are going into his holy places. Sorry for that diatribe, but one of my favorite stories in the Torah, and I always bring it up whenever I can, is Numbers 11, the story of the quail. What a wonderful tale that is, because again, it has all the fun pieces. It has irony, it has a fun comedic conversation. This is definitely a comedy. And it has God changing his mind, and it has an over-the-top set piece, which I didn't really realize what was being said at the time. So we're going to go through it here a little bit because it is a fantastic story. Them asking for water and God sending snakes, that's horrific. It's a little bit entertaining, but it also has the cool bronze snake that you look at, which later is like the rod of Asclepius or whatever. Cool. I like it. Neat. But the story of the quail is just like beautifully written. It's fantastic. I mean, it could be written better, but it's fantastic. The people are bored of manna. The people are bored of free food falling from the sky, which, fair enough, it's boring food, but it's just funny that they're like, do we have to eat more of this manna? As if that's a big deal, by the way. But God does find it a big deal. It doesn't like it. He finds it really upsetting. So Moses hears them complaining and he goes to God. And this is so funny. This is funny dialogue. He goes, why are you burdening me with these annoying people? Why do I have to listen to this? Like, I'm so sick of it. You leave me in charge of these annoying, whiny, groaning people. It's like if you're a stay-at-home mom and your husband comes home from work and you're like, do you know what the kids did today? Why do I have to sit here and be burdened with these horrible, badly behaved children? It's not unlike that, right? He even says, why do you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries an infant to the land that you promised on an oath to their ancestors? Like, why am I the one that has to do this? This is so annoying. Like, why me? Which is great because it's in character, right? Because he already was complaining about this at the bush. He's like, I don't really want to do this. And then he's like, they're babies. Why are you leaving me in charge of these babies? That's funny. Like, that's funny dialogue, guys. And I think we miss it because we're taking it a bit too seriously sometimes as Christians or even atheists, because it's like, why would God do that? Or, what's the lesson here? They were groaning, so they deserve death. Like, either way, it's a little bit too far. We should just stay right here in the myth land and go, this is funny. Like, this is so silly. He's like, where can I get meat? I need some meat for these people. They just keep on wailing for meat. And he even says, how can I carry these people by myself? If this is how you're going to treat me, just kill me now. I can't do it. I can't listen to the complaining. Like, what? And this is dramatic. Like, this is comedically dramatic. Why does he you just have to hear some people go like, we're sick of manna. Why do I have to listen to this? Why are you guys saying this to me? God, just kill me now. I can't carry these babies. They're whining. They're crying and crying and crying. Like, this is funny. This is really funny. So God's like, all right, get some elders together or whatever. I'll come down and we'll have a conversation and I'll let you know what I'm going to do. And he says this fantastic thing. And this is where the irony comes in. It's comedic. Like, if this is God genuinely speaking, then I would go, oh, God's got a sense of humor. He's funny. Or he's just like really angry and dumb. So he goes, you guys are going to eat meat tomorrow. Set up a picnic. He says, consecrate yourselves in preparation for tomorrow. Set up a picnic. I will give you meat and you will eat it. You will not eat it for just 1 day or 2 days or 5, 10 or 20 days, but for a whole month until it comes out of your nostrils and you loathe it because you have rejected the Lord who is among you and you have wailed before him saying, why did we ever leave Egypt? So he's like, you don't like me? You don't think I'm the best anymore? Then I'm going to give you meat. I'm going to give you the desires of your heart. So much of it that it's going to come out of your nostrils, obviously hyperbole, and you're going to loathe it. I'll make you hate it. I'm just a cruel guy that way. What a piece of garbage. Really funny because he's using what they want against them. And he's jealous. He's jealous that they're not happy with him. So he's like, all right, let's do this thing. Moses, he's like, I don't see that happening. He's like, and you're now going like, oh, I'll give them meat for a whole entire month. Where are we going to get that kind of meat? We don't have those kind of animals. We've been burning most of them. You told us to burn most of them. I think we'd be emptying the sea of all the fish. But God, of course, actually answers. And he's like, are my arms too short? Pull the arms in, and then you're like, oh, I can't reach. Is it what I am? Just you wait. Just you wait and see what I will do. Right? So this is, again, fun dialogue, really fun dialogue. God sends the quail. It is 2 cubits deep, which I don't know how deep that is, but whatever depth it is, out to a day's walk around the camp. So I picture just like tons of quail, maybe it's up to your knees. Wait, like you would walk for a day and there would still be more quail, right? So it's like tons of quail in a huge circle around the camp, which I didn't realize. I thought you'd have to walk to get the pile of quail, but no, it's a pile of quail, like so much quail. Everyone gets like 2,000 pounds of quail or something ridiculous. This is over the top. This is, again, a Noah's Ark-esque set piece of just like epic proportions, so much quail. They're like, look at all this quail. And everyone collects quail. They're just like, we got so much quail. This is almost like the kids running into Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. And there's just like so much there that you can try and eat. And, you can drink from the river of chocolate until you fall in and almost die and all the rest of it, right? Like, this is fantastic. This is a wonderful fantasy story. And they get all of this quail and they go to eat it. They must have cooked it. They go to eat it. And in that moment, and this is a great punchline, a great ironic punchline, God kills them immediately. They don't even get to eat it, which means he lied or he changed his mind. Like it was either a lie saying like, you guys are going to eat meat. No, they're not. And they're not. So, or I'm going to definitely have you guys eat it for a whole month. I actually changed my mind. I'm going to kill you now. But the fact that he killed them with the very thing that they were craving is fun. Like, that's a fun irony. As long as it's not true, I would assume for the people reading it, they're just like, this is fantastic. This is really great. This is funny. They were complaining and God, screwed them over. What a fun episode. And I think that they sandwich these really funny, ironic tales. They start a lot of that in Genesis, but then they sandwich it amongst the details of how they made stuff and the laws and all that boring stuff, you know what I mean? And then, of course, the propaganda rhetoric of Deuteronomy, which has everything to do with the Babylonian exile and all those things. Everything kind of is doing that, right? Like, there's always purpose from Genesis 1, to the end of the Torah. There's intention behind everything that's in there, I'm sure. Maybe some folk tales, but I don't think there's anything in there that is not purposeful. And finally, I really enjoyed the story of Balaam and his donkey. This is a great little work of fiction where you get the rule of 3 again, but you get it 3 times, which is really neat. So you get Balaam being invited to go ask God to bless Balak and the Midianites, I think. And so he goes and he says, hey, can I do that to God? And God's like, no. And he asks him again. He says, no. And the servants keep on going, we'll give you more money. We'll give you more money. You'll be very rich. So he keeps on asking God, and God's like, no. And then the 3rd time, all right, fine. So then he's heading to go see Balak, and the angel stops and scares the donkey, and the donkey keeps on trying to not go forward. And that happens 2 times until the 3rd time. The angel opens the donkey's mouth and the donkey talks, and Balaam barely reacts, but they have a conversation. That's entertaining. That's fun. Of course, anyone reading this in that time is probably like, oh, a donkey talks. What? This is fun. So it's an interesting, compelling story. Of course, juvenile and silly. The dialogue, like there's no reaction from Balaam, which I think they should have put it in there if they were going to be a little bit more true to what probably could have happened. But it's such a simple fiction, and they have their goals, so they just put this fun, silly little tale in there, and then they move on. And then when they finally get to Balak, they go 3 times to do some sacrifices and to see if God will decide to bless him. But he doesn't, and Balaam does whatever oracling that he is required to do by God. He speaks for God, and he's like, no one's going to mess with Israel. But this is one of the cool moves too, right? Because you get this story of just Hebrews, right? From the beginning of Genesis all throughout, it's just all the different Hebrews, the genealogy kind of where they came from, and all of their little folk stories, and everything that leads them finally to being slaves in Egypt and then getting out of Egypt. And all of this is Israel focused. But suddenly we get kind of a meanwhile in Midian. Like it's just this totally different, like we're going away. Like the camera just like pans over to a totally different group of people. What a cool move, right? And then we get Balaam, just this other guy, and he talks to Yahweh. How does that make sense? Because we still have to have the Yahweh character. It's just an interesting sort of like written by Hebrews, like everyone's talking about us and people are nervous about us. And they're even going to ask God, our God, to mess with us. But guess what? He's not going to. And then he's going to do this speech, which, the Hebrew is reading, going, I will never mess with the Hebrews. They're great. They don't do all the bad things everyone else does. And that's going to make them be like, yeah, we are good, God's on our team, no one else's team. That's kind of a cool move for the people to get them away from their little perspective into someone else's perspective, like a change of perspective. That's pretty good. I think that's a good literary move. I don't know how often it's going to be utilized in the Bible, but as far as like the Torah, the first 5 books, it's kind of cool that it's done, I think, literally one time, right? So I'm sure there were other things that I loved about the Torah. There's a lot in there to hate, but I think that I spelled that out in all of the videos that I made. I always just kind of like picked on what it was actually saying and how a Christian often looks at it, or how a Christian tries to look at it, but it just doesn't work. So of course I do read it from the perspective of an ex-fundamentalist Christian. But if I read it from just a person reading old myths, the way you might read the Greek myths or any other myths, and we don't have to believe this, it's actually silly to believe it, and we don't have to be angry at what any of the characters do, because it's all fiction, right? And it never happened. As long as no one would believe it, unfortunately some people do, but you can look at it as what a funny move, or what are these people trying to say, and these kinds of things. And it is actually really interesting and really fun. And if you haven't read it, you can read it with me. Just go all the way back to Genesis chapter 1, and I read the full chapters of the Bible. I'm going to be reading the whole entire thing. So check it out. It's actually kind of fun. In the meantime, subscribe, like this video, maybe leave a comment. That would be nice. Push it into the algorithm. And we will see you next time for Joshua chapter 1. Bye.